Hi, welcome back. Today is our lecture number 3. Today we are going to study a very important concept, very important topic. You remember that the title of this course is Supply Chain Management, a Learning Perspective. And I emphasize the learning in our title because that's kind of a element that drives the dynamic features in this course. First, we need to understand, we need to define what learning is, because that's very basics of this lecture. So I want to talk about this learning. What is learning? But actually, it's very widely used term, and it seems like everybody knows what the learning is. And therefore, it seems somewhat useless to try to define the widely used term learning. But I think that at the same time, I believe, learning is overused word without concrete definition, without concrete defining the true meaning of that word. I want to focus on the context of our course. In other words, I want to define learning in the context of supply chain management. And obviously, learning is a very general, term, general concept, but I want to focus, I want to highlight those features of learning that are very closely related with the discussion we want to have in this course. So let's say, what is learning? And I would just say that the learning, at least in our course, or at least for the purpose of our learning, is process. What kind of process is it? Gaining knowledge. So we want to make sure that we learn something. And what is that something? Well, we will be more elaborate. We will be more elaborate on that. What? I mean, that we try to get some knowledge about what and what part. We will talk about it later. So learning is the process of gaining knowledge through study. What does that mean? I want to summarize the features in 3 ways. First, when we say that the learning is a process, that means that it's not a one-time single isolated event. You can never say that I completed the learning. Learning is not completed. You must go on. You must continue your learning. So it's kind of a process, and it must be dynamic, and it must be continuous. And therefore, when we talk about learning, we want to look at this ongoing, dynamic, a series of events, activities. And also learning, in the context of our learning, context of our course, accumulating knowledge. And it's not for the sake of learning. Learning is not for the sake of learning. Learning is for the sake of accumulating knowledge. And what kind of knowledge? That knowledge must be useful. Useful for what? Useful for problem solving. And therefore, we can resolve some difficult situations, difficult issues. Or the knowledge must be useful for further learning. And remember that the learning is a process. That means that learning must continue, and therefore part of learning must be used for further learning. And finally, I want to say that learning is not just a simple byproduct. It's not a byproduct. You got to have conscious effort. You have to do studying. You have to do experimenting. You have to, making a great effort to achieve, to learn, to accumulate knowledge and so on and so forth. So I don't like the concept of learning is kind of byproduct. If you do something and while you do something, you can get some sort of learning. That's not true. Maybe in some sense it can be true, but in the context of our studying, in the context of our course, I would just say that the learning must be a conscious effort. What does that mean? It implies that the managers must put aside the resources for the learning purpose specifically. In other words, now, learning is becoming a legitimate area the manager must pay attention to, or the manager must reserve resources for. So in this course, or at least in this chapter, we're going to define operations learning, which we somehow already done, right? We define the learning. But in our next slide, we're going to be more specific, more thorough about the learning in operations, or learning in the context of supply chain management. So we want to define the learning in a more formal way, and then I will explain a little bit about this, how this learning is related with the supply chain management, how the managers can use the concept of learning or the learning process so that she or he can improve the supply chain performance. As I emphasized several times, learning is very important perspective. Actually, the most important perspective we use in this course.